Good afternoon, Mr. Mantei. My name is Andrew Morton. I'm Chair of the 7th Circuit JNC. Thank you for coming this afternoon. And can you open the interview by introducing yourself and telling us why you want to be a circuit court judge?
Sure. My name is Rich Mantei. I currently work with the Office of Statewide Prosecution for the Attorney General. I've been there almost 5 years now. Was a prosecutor before that, mostly in the 4th Circuit in Jacksonville, Florida, and I've been a law clerk since my first 4.5 years out of law school. The reason I want to be a circuit court judge now, age and stage, I would say, is probably the best way to put that. I've reached the age in my life where my children are almost grown. I've got one boy who's about to turn 17, so I will be not having him around to kick me around the house for a little while here very shortly. It's going to make the mother very sad. I have a daughter who's in college already, so I've already had to cross into this, and so I'm looking at the point where if I'm going to do this sort of thing, now is about the time I would consider to be the best time to do that, transition it. Being a judge has always kind of been, ever since I was a law clerk to judges myself, it's kind of always been around there in the back of the mind. I love litigation, I love what I do, I like being in court and trying cases, and it's seemingly a good evolution, and so it's a logical next step. It's something I wanted to explore, and now seems to be an opportunity to do so.
The current spot, circuit spot, is a family law bench. Obviously that could change if you got that spot. At some point it would change. But tell me about your experience with family law. I do know you did some work during law school, but how would you adapt into a family law spot if that's where you end up?
I think that a lot of what I do has sort of touched or danced around angles of family law. You know, every domestic case I've ever handled has some kind of family court angle. Every case that involves a child victim has a family court angle. A lot of cases also involve you're separating, or you have witnesses who are impugned with allegations that they're trying to get a better angle in the alimony case. But to more directly answer the question, there was a time where I didn't have a lot of experience dealing with DNA or electronic tracking devices or other things of that nature, psychology, psychiatry. And what you have to do is dig in and learn things, understand you're not going to know everything right away, be willing to accept that fact. I've actually already, since in the past few months, I've actually started taking a CLE in family law. I've done a lot of work prior to that with what you call U visas and that sort of thing, which are fairly intimately connected with a lot of the family cases that I used to handle. As a supervising attorney, I would have to make U visa decisions, and so that's been the area that I've explored here more recently with the CLEs. So I think you have to, it's another area to have to learn, and I think you have to be willing to do that, take advice from people who've done it. I know that usually most judges have other judges available to them to ask questions. I think in many cases it's a function of going in, learning the basics, learning the rules, learning the lay of the land, understanding that you're not going to know it all ahead of time, and being willing to accept that criticism and make the best of it. So it's a learning curve, but I don't think it's a whole lot different than a learning curve that a lot of other people would have to engage in regardless of the area of the law. I had to do it when you move from prosecuting certain types of cases to others, and you have to do the same thing here.
Mr. Mantei, this is Chris Green. Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
So as you know, as we all do, court dockets are overwhelmed and backlog, and late having to go to the court access. Can you share with us your thoughts about your philosophy approach to moving the docket forward efficiently, making sure that justice is served in a timely manner?
Sure. Being with the statewide prosecutor's office, I've had a chance to see how different people do it, and working with some committees at the bar, I've had a chance to learn that there's no one-size-fits-all solution necessarily. There's a lot of creativity out there among the courts. So my philosophy on managing a docket is, number one, you have to be willing to set deadlines, respect deadlines, move them when necessary, understand when things need to be held to a firm schedule, and when that exception does need to get made for people's certain circumstances. Every client who comes before a judge thinks their case is the most important one in the world, and it's important that they leave that courtroom feeling the same way. Treating someone as though they're just the next number on an assembly line or a mill tends to reflect poorly on the perception that that person is going to take out of that courtroom with them. It tends to discourage people from wanting or feeling like that the justice system has truly been the justice system as opposed to an assembly line. And so my philosophy is, look, preparation is key. The judge has to go in and lead by example. If the judge walks in prepared, if the judge walks in ready to move things forward, in command of the law, in command of the facts of the cases before him, then that tends to inspire and motivate people to try to keep up. So first and foremost, you have to lead by example. Secondly, you have to be willing to stick to deadlines and schedules. And third, you have to be understanding enough to know that you're not always going to be able to do that and be able to adapt accordingly. As innovations come along, it's important to have an open mind about using them, but there are very few magic bullets in our industry, and so you still have to be willing to put in the work. Technology is great, but I think you probably vouch for this today, it's not always going to be working the best, and it's not always going to make life more efficient. Sometimes it's the opposite effect. So adaptability and resoluteness.
What about justice and giving a criminal defendant their opportunity? How would you handle sentencing if you were on the criminal bench?
Well, I've been lucky enough to have seen an awful lot of good examples to learn from in that regard. Obviously, as a prosecutor, I make decisions all day, every day that affect people's lives, and in many ways, we control the sentence they get in the first place, whether it's by the charges we file, by the mandatories we file, by what we seek, by what we score, by what we recommend. So there's a lot of that I've already kind of built into my calculus professionally as to what is a case in particular worthy of for sentencing purposes, and then how about this particular person? Is there anything about them? What is there about them that makes this a unique or a situation that might call for something else? Could I do it? I do it all day, every day in every recommendation that I make. Those are not, and especially, I've stood before juries and judges and asked them to sentence people to death. Those are not decisions you make lightly, whether it's, I've also toured enough jails and prisons and seen that enough to know I wouldn't last 2 days in there myself. So it's not a cavalier or light thing that you do when you impose a sentence on someone's behavior. That said, there needs to be, the rest of the public needs to respect that process and feel like they are being protected and treated justly as well. The victims of the case have as much interest many times in a sentence that's going to be meted out as the litigants on either side of the aisle, the lawyers, and sometimes even sometimes a victim feels that they haven't had as much impact upon them from a sentence as the defendant themselves.
Can you think of an example where you had offered a certain resolution and the defense went to the judge, and after maybe a sentencing hearing you thought, well, okay, maybe I did get it wrong, maybe I shouldn't have had this position because now I see a different side. Has that happened?
Sure. Yeah, that's happened. I've had a case in St. Johns County, probably a little over a year ago, where I'd asked for a longer time, but the defendant came in and he had some very powerful witnesses to speak on his behalf as to some particular things about him and his situation, and the judge felt that he thought a sentence that less than a good deal less, probably about 30% less than what I asked for was appropriate. I really, after I listened to it, I can't disagree. So yes, and in fact, sometimes even before we get to the point of sentencing, I'll make an offer. The defense counsel will come in and say, hey, look, you need to know this, 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 and this. And I'll be like, okay, I'm glad you told me that. I'm glad I found that out. Because now the game changes, the calculus changes, and maybe what I wanted before doesn't accurately reflect what I'm looking for. Sometimes I find out that there's a particular thing in that person's background, or that there is a backstory between the person and the victim that I wasn't aware of. You have to be willing to change your position as new facts come to light. You can't be ironclad. That being said, you should have done your homework up front enough ahead of time to be fairly confident that the position you take is just and correct. Don't assume you're always going to be right, but you should have a basis for thinking that you're in the ballpark.
Mr. Mantei, we interviewed you 2 months ago for a county job, and now this is a circuit job.
Yes, sir.
2 questions. Which you want to be a county or a circuit judge? And the second part is, as a circuit judge, it's much more challenging to run the entire circuit. How are you going to do that?
Okay. For starters, I kind of had a little, after our last interview,
Yeah.
I got a little constructive criticism, and some of that was, you might be better suited for a circuit position. Your particular skill set might play better there than in county. Kind of take that to heart. I'm not too old or set in my ways to learn a few things every now and then. So I understood that was a reasonable thing to say. Hope that answers the first part of that question a little bit. It's not that I would not want to be a county judge, but I consider a circuit judge position to be one that might suit my skill set. As far as the second part, running, I've never run for office before, but I sure know and have worked with some people who have. I think sort of unappreciated in some of that is the sheer amount of work that takes. The going and meeting people, making yourself available, making yourself known in the community, because you have to go to people and you have to ask for them to work for you, recommend you to their friends, vote for you, donate to you, hold signs for you, and all of that takes work on the front end. I'm not naive to the idea that it's going to take something. I've never done it before. I view it much the same as I would the earlier question about moving into a family law court, an area that's not in my wheelhouse. Doesn't mean I'm afraid to go in and do that work. I have, since the last time we spoke on that score, I've kind of talked to some people who would be involved in that sort of thing. It's great to know important people. That helps, but it's making yourself more of a part of the community. So since we spoke last, I've actually become a member of the Volusia County Bar Association. I'm in the process of joining the St. Johns County Bar Association. I am in the process of joining the St. Augustine of Court. I reached out to some of my friends in law enforcement through their union, which isn't just the bosses or the sheriffs, but this is the guys who make the signs, hold the signs, have the dinners, that sort of thing, and explored that. And I realized that I've got a little, if you were appointed to this position, you're going to have a little time to get that in place, but it certainly needs to get done, and I'm prepared to do it.
Let me ask you a question.
It's not a lot of time.
What about,
Not a lot.
what if Judge Clayton, you get appointed and Judge Clayton says, look, you can sit on any docket in any county, where are you choosing?
Oh, from a purely selfish perspective for that, I live in St. Johns County, so just from a sheer commute perspective, that would make it easiest for me. I can't imagine saying anything else other than if you're asking me where geographically would fit, that'd be my request. As far as what kind of docket, criminal is in my wheelhouse. It's where I'm most comfortable. But I'm not really going to be in a position to be picky about that. I kind of like challenges. It's not something I shy away from. I think it's learning something new and being able to serve in a new way is a good thing. And I don't want to necessarily get sort of roped into the idea that I only want to do one thing ever for the rest of days in my career. I enjoy what I do. I like what I do, but I've enjoyed moving from prosecuting one type of cases to another. I've enjoyed moving from one jurisdiction to another. And so I wouldn't if you're making me pick one, I think the ones that obviously make the most sense are criminal docket in St. Johns County. But that is sheer a function of exactly where I am now and not where I think I need to be.
Any other questions? You guys got anything on Zoom? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is the cell phone number you listed in your application a good way to get a hold of you?
It is, thank you so much.